On the 9th of December 1965, hundreds of witnesses in Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania saw an unidentified flying object streak through the sky. But it was the people of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, who not only saw, but actually found what many claim was a vehicle from outer space. The object was clearly seen, not just falling, but appearing to land in the woods nearby. Within 2 hours, armed military forces of the U.S. government literally invaded this small Pennsylvania town, retrieved the object, and hauled it away. What was it that fell or landed near Kecksburg, Pennsylvania? Does the U.S. government now have an authentic UFO in its possession? The astonishing and disturbing answers when we return. For nearly 45 years, Kecksburg, Pennsylvania has been a town divided by a bizarre controversy. Many of its citizens claim that nothing out of the ordinary has ever happened there, while other residents claim that in December of 1965, this Westmoreland County village was briefly the home of a crashed UFO. What is the truth about this strange metal object that witnesses say crashed in the woods near Kecksburg? And why do some of them say the local people were ordered to keep quiet about what happened?
What you saw out there in that field, it was nothing.
Was it because they had stumbled across some top-secret government project? Or because they had seen an object that proved the existence of intelligent life on other planets? To learn the truth, we'll have to go back to that December afternoon in 1965.
It was about 4:47 p.m. when the object apparently impacted in the woods at Kecksburg. There are a number of local residents around Kecksburg who saw the object get down into the wooded area. While none of these people reported any type of sound of impact, almost momentarily there was a column of blue smoke that rose up out of the woods.
According to the eyewitness accounts, Kecksburg residents rushed to the spot where they now saw smoke rising through the trees.
By the gulch, I saw a big boom over here.
There, they say they discovered a metallic object partially buried at the bottom of a ravine, still smoking from its long descent through the Earth's atmosphere. Kecksburg resident Jim Romansky says he was one of the first to locate the object at the bottom of a densely wooded ravine.
Here was this large metal object in front of me. I've described it as a large acorn. And the reason I say the acorn is because around the bottom of this object there was a bumper that went the whole way around this thing. It was dented and it had a very distinct color. This thing was a bronze, copper, steel. It was a color that it's very hard even to describe. You know?
Then, according to Romansky and many other witnesses, armed U.S. soldiers began to arrive with trucks and other heavy equipment.
You know, the military started coming in. We were under martial law. Jeeps, trucks everywhere. The MPs were at every corner.
Down through the woods come two guys. Trench coats, crew cut hair. He looked around. He looked at the object, he looked at us, and a very authoritative voice told us that this area is now quarantined, it's restricted, to get out.
Okay, guys, let's split up the...
According to Romansky and many other witnesses interviewed by Stan Gordon, the object only remained in the ravine for a few hours because the soldiers who had so quickly arrived on the scene recovered the object and took it somewhere else.
Here comes this big flatbed truck. The back of this flatbed, they had this big tarp on it, and it was stretched down around this object. And it had the same outline. In fact, I know I could see the bumper under this tarp because you could see the shape of this thing. The tarp was pulled so tight that you could see the shape. And I knew in my mind that was what they brought down off that mountain, the object.
The military truck with the flatbed trailer with the object on it departed late that evening from Kecksburg. And from information we now have, the truck continued on and it went to Lockbourne Air Force Base in Columbus, Ohio, where it stayed over for a short period of time. From there, it went over to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. It seems very likely that our government had tracked the object and they had notified the quick response recovery teams that are involved in this type of operation.
Since the object was taken away and, to date at least, never seen again, you might think that as far as the residents of Kecksburg were concerned, the incident was over. But according to a number of eyewitnesses, the most terrifying aspect of their encounter with a UFO had just begun.
John Murphy, who was a news director of WHJB, felt that the story concerning the object at Kecksburg was of great importance. So he did a lot of investigation on the case and interviewed a number of witnesses who had been involved or had knowledge about the incident.
Now, what exactly did you see?
I saw a ship falling from the sky and it was burning.
Is that what you saw, ma'am?
It was in the shape of an acorn, came down out of the sky, and it just landed really smoothly in the woods. It had interesting writing on it, like nothing we've ever seen in this world.
Writing, you sure it wasn't like Japanese writing or something that you haven't seen before?
Very different.
You're saying it's a spaceship now, not anything that our
UFO.
government...
Yeah.
Yes,
It was
absolutely.
So what is the situation here on the home front and around here with all the soldiers?
We don't know what's happening, so it's very frightening.
According to the witness accounts, something seemed to have badly frightened a good many of those who had seen the unidentified flying object and who had witnessed its recovery by the military.
This is John Murphy. We're going to cut for a quick commercial break. Hello, this is John.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Sally?
Hey, Sally, how are you doing?
Listen, about our interview?
Yes, that was a great interview yesterday. You and your son did a good job.
Well, I know I thought I was short, but I'm not. And I made a big mistake, and you need to not air it.
What?
Bye.
Well, people make mistakes, and I was wrong.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
And we're back.
It seems as though something must have occurred between the time of the interview with John Murphy and the time that the radio special was to be aired, because of the fact that these people were willing to be interviewed and then suddenly they decided they didn't want their name or any information aired with this report.
Why? What happened to cause the witnesses to refuse to make their testimony public when they'd been willing to do so only hours before? Did something of unknown origin land or crash near Kecksburg, Pennsylvania? Or didn't it? What could bring the military out so quickly and in such numbers to what is still a rural township in the Pennsylvania hills? Is there an official government position on this as yet unexplained event? And if there is, what exactly is it? The disturbing answers are just ahead. With a few minor variations, what we have just seen is the story eyewitnesses have been telling about the Kecksburg event for the past 45 years. It seems simple and straightforward enough. A flaming object of some sort came down in the woods, a number of people saw it in the sky, some went to the site and actually examined it close up. Then military officials came in, scooped it up, and hauled it away. That should have been the end of it. But there are complications. Jim Romansky says that he has maintained for 40 years that the meteor story was the one given to some Kecksburg residents by the military.
To jump in a truck and someone said, hey, what was that up there anyhow? And the guy hollered back, oh, it was a meteorite. And I looked at one guy and we both bust out laughing because we knew it was no meteorite.
But strangely enough, there was a meteor sighting that very night, seen by hundreds of people across the northeastern United States and some parts of Canada. That is a fact that is not in question. But could it have been seen in Kecksburg?
A typical meteorite event is one of the most spectacular things that is fairly commonly observed on the Earth. An object from space plunges into the atmosphere of the Earth, perhaps as fast as 40 miles a second. It pushes the air in front of it. The air pressure builds up and often fragments the object, breaking it into many pieces. It looks like a shower of Roman candle as the pieces then disappear. And the fireball can be very bright, so bright it can be seen in broad daylight as a brilliant thing in the sky, or so bright that it can light the whole night sky almost like day.
Could this have been what the area residents in and around Kecksburg actually saw?
I was working on my car, Corvair, out in the driveway, and I heard this sizzling noise, and I couldn't figure out what it was. It didn't sound like an airplane. And I looked up in the sky, and coming from the north, I'd say northwest, and headed east-southeast, and it looked like a big fireball. It was up there about, I'd say 2 or 3 miles, maybe better than that. And I watched it, and it seemed like it was headed for the mountain. So I went out on the road right out here, and I watched it, and it seemed like it couldn't make up its mind what it wanted to do, just like if it was radio controlled. It made like a figure 8, and it come back in, I'd say, almost into Kecksburg, and it just went down. It just disappeared.
There are two things that you can guarantee with almost every fireball event. One is that it's interpreted in the experience of the viewer, so there'll be a lot of different interpretations. And secondly is that there'll be a lot of misimpressions, a lot of confusion, and that the people who believe they know where it landed are really very far away from where the event occurred.
And I figured, well, I'm going to go up and look. So I figured, well, I'll go up there where I used to go hunting and set up on top of the hill, and you can overlook Kecksburg down in the valley, and that would be a good spot to find something. So I went up, and I looked down in the woods, upper part of the woods there at the edge, and you could see this arcing, and just looked like somebody welding or something. So I went down, got my flashlight, went down and crossed the creek, and I went up, and there it was. I says, I couldn't figure out what it was. And it looked like an acorn, but the front end of it was dug down in the ground about 2 or 3 feet, and there was no windows in it. There was no rivet marks or nothing. It just laid there, and it was like arcing, and you could smell like some kind of a acid or something like that, a burn or something. And I figured, well, it couldn't be an airplane. It couldn't be a meteorite, because meteorite, I understand, whenever they come down with a bang. They come straight down. And this couldn't have been a meteor. And like people says, it must have been a meteor. I said, no, it wasn't a meteor. I said, it was something that I'd never seen before.
Bill Buellbush was just one of the eyewitnesses to get within 15 to 20 feet of the object. He and other witnesses described it as about the size of a Volkswagen, but plainly visible. Could they be describing a meteorite?
If you had a meteorite the size of a Volkswagen surviving to the Earth's surface, it's going to be going at a velocity of 4 or 5 miles per second. It's going to make a crater in the soil, and it'll do shockwave excavation. It'll make a crater maybe 4 to 10 times its own diameter, depending on its velocity. And at the end of that, if it has not disrupted, it will burrow out at the bottom of the crater and make a little tunnel and come to rest at the end of that tunnel.
Obviously, what eyewitnesses say they saw in the woods that night was not the object meteorologists would describe as a meteorite. Yet the very fact that there was a meteor seen in the area that night has added confusion to the controversy.
The evidence that the object was a meteor is overwhelming. It was well documented by sightings and photographs taken widely apart in different parts of the country. The fact that it was seen from such widely separated areas demonstrates that it was something very high in the sky, which fits naturally the description of a bolide or a fireball. Also, it was traveling at the appropriate speed, about 32,000 miles per hour. And astronomers estimated that, plus they even have a photograph of a smoke trail. So it's well documented that it was a meteor.
On December 9th, 1965, 4:43 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, a meteorite entered the atmosphere south of Detroit, headed out over Ontario, south of Windsor, Ontario, and any fragments would have landed in the area south and east of Windsor, Ontario. It would have been seen over a much wider area, however. It could have been seen in the Kecksburg area, but there's no question it could not have landed there. It was headed in the wrong direction.
Yet there also seems to be little question that the military did move into Kecksburg very quickly and with considerable purpose and manpower.
So we went back up, and I say in an hour, maybe hour and 20, 30 minutes, something like that. And you couldn't get near the place. I says cars and people and everything. So we finally worked our way up into where I had the car park before. And my kid couldn't get over. The Army was down in there, the trucks, and the Army, they had like a fence around there that you weren't allowed in there, and that was it.
It seems unlikely that the U.S. military would take such extreme measures to protect a meteorite. Yet some witnesses today insist they were threatened. Others claim nothing at all happened.
I think these people knew that something had come down, and the military presence was so strong that night that a lot of people who the military knew, seen something or lived real close to it, was either told to be quiet or were bought out or something.
You guys listen up. What you saw out there, it was nothing. Don't say anything to anyone. Not your mom, not your dad, or anyone.
But remember, John Murphy, news director of the local radio station, was already interviewing witnesses for a special news program he called Object in the Woods. Suddenly, he ran into a stone wall. Could there be more to this part of the story than meets the eye? There are those who believe John Murphy may have been an eyewitness himself.
He told me that something had landed in the woods. He didn't know what, but he was going down there. When he came back up, at some point there, military had come in. The state police were there. He couldn't get back down. They took the film out of his camera, but I believe he still had some in his pocket that they didn't find. He had his tape recorder with him.
From all accounts, John Murphy was an aggressive professional newsman. Could it be he actually got photographs of the object?
I know John had pictures of the object. He told me he did. He wouldn't lie about that. It's too good a story to pass up.
But unfortunately, John Murphy never got to tell his story.
We received other calls early tonight from some other people who said they'd changed their minds now, at the last minute, and did not want the statements they had made over this past weekend used on this radio program tonight. One person said that they was afraid of the state police, and another person said they did not want to get in trouble with the Army.
A week or two after that, after they had censored, or the program had to be so censored, that he clammed up all of a sudden himself. Wouldn't talk about it. Somebody had to have gotten to him, because it was very unlike John to just drop something.
John apparently let the matter drop for several years, but a few weeks after giving Stan Gordon a copy of the complete uncut tape that he never got on the air, John Murphy was killed in a bizarre hit and run near Santa Barbara, California.
As I read on the police report, he was looking at, or crossing the road to look at, the oil slicks up in Santa Barbara at 10 o'clock at night. Why would he cross a road at 10 o'clock at night to see an oil slick? The whole thing didn't make sense. It's like, somebody want to shut him up?
We may never know. Even the tape given to Stan Gordon has mysteriously disappeared. All of that notwithstanding, the official government position, even today, is that what actually came down in Kecksburg was a meteor. A flaming object that made a controlled landing. A metallic shape without joints or seams. Strange markings unlike anything on Earth. Rapid military deployment. If all these clues are based on fact, do they indeed add up to some kind of spacecraft from another world? Or is there some other possibility that might excite that level of government interest? It is not disputed that the military gathered up and hauled something away from Kecksburg that night. We can safely assume it wasn't a meteorite. So what was it? Clifford Stone, a former military NCO involved with UFO investigations, believes he knows.
I believe the United States government has the crashed remains of several UFO crashes as well as debris of several other UFOs, to include the object that was recovered from Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. My basis for this belief is on what I have observed and what I have been involved in for 22.5 years serving this great nation of ours.
The government, of course, has not owned up to any such thing. The eyewitness testimony and the scientific analysis appears to confirm that there was a meteor visible over a wide area of the Northeast on the night of December 9, 1965. But that same evidence suggests it could not possibly have been a meteorite that landed at Kecksburg. Then could it be the much-discussed Soviet Venus probe Cosmos 96, which is known to have fallen out of orbit on that same date?
Remember that by 1965, both the United States and the Soviet Union had the capability of putting nuclear weapons in orbit, and each was desperate to learn about the technology of the other. These rockets had segments that were jettisoned in flight and that fell back toward the Earth, presumably to burn up on re-entry. This practice has continued to the present day, and we now know that sometimes large parts of these space vehicles do not burn up entirely. Occasionally, a rather large fragment will actually reach the ground intact.
It has indeed been verified from the U.S. Space Command and the Naval Surveillance Center that Cosmos 96 did indeed re-enter the Earth's atmosphere at about 3:18 a.m. on the same morning of the Kecksburg incident, and that occurred in Canada. Cosmos 96 was a Venus probe, and there are in fact similarities in the general shape of the two. I think, first of all, we can rule out the fact that the incident in Kecksburg is a hoax. Something did occur there that night that created a lot of activity, and the fact that the military apparently responded in the way they did indicated the fact that this was something that was important to our government and military. I think we can eliminate the possibility that this was an airplane crash, because initially this is what a lot of the different agencies thought may have occurred. After we eliminate all the possibilities we have as to what the object may have been, we have to look at the fact that this may have indeed been either what may have been a highly advanced Soviet space probe, or in fact we might be dealing with an extraterrestrial spacecraft.
A satisfactory explanation for what landed at Kecksburg still eludes serious researchers. But witnesses are certain about one thing: the military landed in Kecksburg that day with an ominous presence. Could it be that there was something going on at that time the government wasn't willing to share with the public? If so, what's the point in keeping it a secret today? Unless, of course, Kecksburg was invaded by both the military and something from outer space.